Welcome to Under the Flat Hat with Chris Burnett and Kevin Heatley. Stories from the front lines of America's public lands and the people who care for them. Honest, unfiltered, and straight from under the hat. You're listening to Under the Flat Hat, a podcast exploring the people, politics, and pressures shaping America's public lands. I'm Chris Burnett, a former National Park Ranger, whiskey distiller, and federal land manager turned attorney. I'm joined by my co-host, a national conservation leader, former National Park superintendent, and an example of why the administration should extend the border wall around New Jersey, Kevin Heatley. Together, we share stories, shine a light on hard truths, and celebrate the resilience of those working behind the scenes. Whether you've worn the flat hat or just care about the future of our parks and public lands, this is your place to listen, learn, and connect.
But Chris, let me ask you then.
Yeah.
Give you an opportunity to kind of introduce yourself to the audience and what your background is and what your skill sets are, and um, kind of let them become more familiar with who you are.
All right. Well, I've done all kinds of stuff, everywhere from working for a nonprofit, environmental nonprofit, to I'm a veteran of the Air Force. I've got all, I could probably talk for a full, couple hours on everything I've done if I do it in progression. Um, but I think what's most interesting though is, I've got some mechanic in the Air Force. I was a farmer for a few years on the family farm. I've run a distillery, made whiskey and moonshine legally and illegally. What the hell? Um, then also, went to school to become, uh, to get more, educated. Ended up going to law school, and then so I've worked in the legal, profession, doing stuff like, you know, representing environmental groups and health groups in front of a state's public service commission. Trying to help with energy regulation. Um, some weird little things, but since going into the federal government, I've been mostly with Interior, and I worked at Hoover Dam. That was a lot of fun. Hoover Dam was one of my favorite places anywhere. I remember when you used to be able to drive across the dam when you're driving from Kingman, Arizona, up to Las Vegas, and that stopped at 9/11. I actually got stopped right after 9/11 on the dam. um, because that's when they started to shut it down, because the dam itself is not only is it a national monument and part of the federal estate, it's also a uh, critical infrastructure, national critical infrastructure. The power plant, in the bowels of the dam, provide electricity to California and all kinds of stuff. So it's a really cool place, and I was able to work there and help protect some of the buildings up top. Um, how to increase, funding, because like with everything else, especially since, I'm going to say it's probably been forever, but it's been more significant since the 80s and 90s. The funding keeps going down and down and down. And so land managers are looking for ways of increasing that funding when Congress won't give it to them. So we have these other ways of doing it. And one of the ideas that we came up with at the dam was, we've got, you know, 10,000 visitors a day sometimes. How can we, increase the amount of money they spend at the dam? you know, so we looked at, some tourism operations type stuff there. Um, and then I worked at Golden Gate doing realty, helping with partnerships and leasing, and how do we better protect these buildings and these properties by getting people in it. It's
So
I don't know if it's
Golden Gate, again, for the listeners in New Jersey, because I know there's like
Golden
two right
Gate
now.
is San Francisco, so directly
There you
across
go.
from um, on the other side. And Golden Gate National Recreation Area is a huge, it's like 66 miles, um, almost 10 miles north of, maybe more, north of the bay, and then down to San Mateo. There are little sections of the recreation area in there, and it is huge. And there are all kinds of sites. A bunch of Coast Guard sites were turned over to the National Park Service. You have Army bases. You have Air Force sites, missile sites from World War II. You have Muir Woods. You have the Golden Gate Bridge itself, which is a national monument, and also, it's still a toll bridge, right? They charge to go across it, but the National Park Service, i.e., me at the time, it was my responsibility to work with the Golden Gate toll quote company, the government entity that ran it, to handle its uh, preservation. Um,
Right.
so there's all kinds of stuff going on out there, and it was really
So
interesting.
just
And
so I understand that, you
yeah,
weren't rappelling off the side of the bridge, scraping
no,
lead paint off, and you weren't in the
no, they had
toll
a
booth.
maintenance team,
You
and
weren't
I
in the
wasn't
toll booth.
collecting.
Okay, I just want to make
Yeah, I
sure that
wasn't collecting
the
tolls.
listeners
Yeah,
understand that what exactly your role was. That
yeah.
you
So
weren't.
every so everything is guided by a contract or an agreement, right? So the Golden Gate Bridge was no exception. There was an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, between the two entities, and that Department of Interior, or the National Park Service, and the Golden Gate Bridge Authority. And this MOU, um, oh gosh, I think it was 50 years old. It hadn't been updated in like 50 years. One of the tasks I had was to update this thing and get both entities to sign off on it. Um, so you're guided by this agreement. So, having a legal background, and land management background, my job was to go through this thing and work with the authority on what they can and can't do, how they need to do things. They were going to put in the nets underneath it. If you don't know, over the years, there's been a lot of people jump off that bridge, committing suicide, or some say they weren't trying to commit suicide, but they're jumping off the bridge anyway. Base jumping, I guess. Um, and one of the things that was really interesting, there was a study done because some people survive. And of everybody that had survived over the last like 20 years, they were asked, did they still want to do it? And every one of them said about halfway down, I was like, crap, what the hell did I do?
So
Right?
they had second thoughts on the way
They
down,
had
huh?
second thoughts on the way down. So the idea was to put a net underneath it to catch people, and it's actually up now. But part of the thing that I worked with was with their project manager. How do you install this thing on a 100-year-old bridge with historical status, and meet the compliance terms for sections? I can name off the historic preservation sections and all that type of stuff, um, but it was a really cool thing to do because it wasn't about stopping them from doing it. It was, how do we do this the best way possible and do the best thing to take care of this asset, which belongs to the American people, right?
Right.
And so I
Right.
really love that about my jobs in the National Park Service, was everything that I worked on, whether it was an old building, or if it happened to be like a trail, a road, a bridge, whatever. I did a lot of infrastructure type stuff because I ran uh, trails and bridges uh, in the National Park Service. My last gig was doing active transportation and trails, and that included the trail bridges and sidewalks, even in some cases. But front country trails, and in some cases, full on backcountry trails. Um, but a lot of
So
infrastructure type stuff.
in addition to catching suicide jumpers, you spent some quality time down in the Grand Canyon, correct?
I did, yeah. I managed I had a couple different jobs there. I was there for a few years, but one of them was the planning office, overseeing transportation, transit, the bus system. Um, One of the things we were able to do before I left was get a grant to build a new bus facility because it hasn't started broken ground yet, but it's paid for and its planning is done and they're ready to pull the trigger on it. Um, but the facility that they had was inadequate for their needs. Our the bus drivers didn't like it. The staff and maintenance crew didn't like it. It you know you had a bus go out, and then if you had one bus down, there was no place to park. You know, all these things. So a bus facility. At the same time, working with my team and my boss at the time, who I still try to talk to ever so often. We touched base just a couple weeks ago, but uh, they electrified the system.
Oh,
So
so
they
they're
have
all
it's not
electric
fully
buses, and they're
not
all
all.
electric buses? Not all of
There's
them?
some
Okay.
electric, and then the rest are compressed natural gas.
Oh,
And
yeah,
yeah,
you know.
so and it's because of where they're at. Some of the routes work well for electricity run, but some are
Right.
longer, and the compressed natural gas is really the only way to go besides gas or diesel. Um,
Yeah,
but
so when you mentioned the bus thing, I got to be honest, I had immediate flashback. So, if you see me like shake on camera, it's because I'm having a flashback on my traumatic employment experiences. When I was director of conservation in New York City, uh, back around 2014, 2015 or so, um, I had to every day go through the Port Authority, take the bus into New York City and go through the Port Authority. And when you say, a bus terminal, immediately I have a flashback to the filthy, disgusting, gritty, grimy, like diesel fumes, lines that are so long you don't even know what's at the end, and you think you're going on your bus, and it ends up to be a pretzel stand. It's just horrible. It's just horrible. Forget about using the restroom. You didn't use the
So now I'm
restroom.
having a flashback of being in San
Uh,
Francisco because I live north of the city because
yeah.
it's so expensive. We couldn't find a place to live nearby, so we lived up. It was actually it was only like 40 miles from the peninsula, but it could take anywhere from 45 minutes to 2.5 hours uh, to get in. And so
Yeah.
I took the bus. I typically took the bus because traffic was so insane. But the problem is the bus only ran like 3 times on my route. And so if it didn't show up for whatever reason, or it was late and you didn't know if it was going to show up, reliability on some of these systems. When I went to when I worked with the Park Service on bus stuff, that's one of my questions I always ask, especially at the Grand Canyon. Are we hitting our bus stops at the right intervals? Do not ever let that drop because keeps people from taking it. So
So when somebody
I'd be
got
up.
on the bus, yeah, if somebody got on the bus at Grand Canyon, did they have your picture up there
No,
at the front of the
no,
bus, and it said, if you have any questions or concerns, please call Chris, and you had your smiley face up there? Because I
no. That
took
would
the
be my
bus at,
friend Pam. Pam managed the contract, so she got
okay,
all the customer complaints. Pam ended up
okay.
working for me later, um,
So you were insulated from that.
but yeah,
Because I
yeah,
took the bus at Grand Canyon to the trailhead and back, and I was impressed. It was nothing like the Port Authority in New York City, which we'll do a whole episode on when I worked as director of conservation in New York City. I've got a ton
yeah,
of good New York City natural resources. As ironic as it sounds, I have a bunch of good stories, and there were some cool people in New York. And as you know, sometimes I'll slip back into that New York, New Jersey affect and accent, and so I
yeah.
apologize ahead of time if that happens.
Well,
But hey,
the
what are you
reason
going
I
to do?
jumped back into that was when the bus didn't come, I had to get my butt down you know to San Francisco, and so there are only two ways to go: either take a car And then if I was past a certain time and before another time, if you hit that rush hour, I'm like, oh my God, it's going to take me 5 hours to get, to get down there. I would end up taking a train
Mm,
down to the ferry, then take the ferry across the bay, and then get on another bus to be able to make it to, to my job. Now you could do it, and it took like an hour and a half, but that was better than waiting 5 hours trying to go through traffic. So I
sure,
just,
sure,
sometimes I talk about bus stuff. I do like I bring that that experience, that trauma, if you will, of having to do that and make it to work every day. Um, when we talk about transit systems in the park, in a park,
right.
these things have to work. They have to, meet the
So
needs
you
of.
have a visceral kind of
I
understanding of,
do, I
yeah,
do,
yeah,
um, because you can't just leave this stuff to chance. And when they do, that's I see people doing that. That's typical when I know they want to kill it. They want to kill the system, or they want to get away from that altogether. And we're seeing that now with the current administration. They're pull I don't know how much funding they pulled from MPS, but I do know from transport DOT they've started pulling funding from transit systems and from active transportation and multimodal projects and stuff. So I already know that these things are on the way out on public lands right now, and that is just a shame because they're so integral to the experience for people, especially people that aren't your typical visitor. Maybe they have mobility issues, or maybe
right.
they're from places that don't need a car, so they come out to the parks, and take the bus or whatever, fly in and get a bus, and they don't have a vehicle. How do these people get around? You can't expect someone to buy a car just to go to Grand Canyon, you know,
So if are
or to
you
have
saying that
amount of money. Oh, go ahead.
the administration is actively discouraging public
I,
transit and encouraging the private automobile? Is that what you're
oh
seeing
yeah,
in based on
oh
your
yeah,
background?
yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm seeing right now. That
Okay.
is happening.
Yeah.
Um, and like I said, it hasn't hit the National Park Service yet that I know of. I haven't been informed that they've yanked any money or killed any projects. Although they did kill a bunch of grant stuff and a bunch of our projects early on in the year, but everything was killed at that point. That was when they came in and said stop everything, and then we had to justify and start getting projects rolling again. And it took a few months. They were starting to pay out stuff end of April into May. Um, so I don't know what's going on right now. It wouldn't take me long to find out, but
Yeah, because this
um,
is a teaser for the audience there is this is also a topic that we're going to explore in depth because one of the things that I recognized early on, and I think the general public recognizes this too, is the issue with transportation in the parks and visitation. It's not an issue of the number of visitors; it's an issue of the number of vehicles, and that's where the user experience gets degraded. So Crater Lake, I'll use that as an example. Uh, I worked with people uh, before I got to Crater Lake that they said, "Oh, I've lived here my whole life, and I've never taken my kids to Crater Lake," and they live, you know, in the closest town to Crater Lake, and they've never taken their kids to Crater Lake. And you ask them, "Well, why wouldn't you take your kids to Crater Lake?" Well, it's a zoo. There's too much traffic. You sit in a line that's 2 miles long, literally 2 miles long,
hmm
that plugs up
yeah,
the whole 2-lane road that crosses the Cascades because people are trying to get into the park with their personal vehicle. And the National Park Service, and not to slam the Park Service, but this is going back 100 years ago. They had a conscious effort to encourage the personal automobile, as we saw even in New York City. There was a guy that destroyed the waterfront in New York City back in the 30s, a guy named Robert Moses. There's a book called, I think it's called Power Broker. I can't remember the name of the book exactly. But Robert Moses he worked for the parks in New York City, and he was the one that developed all those freeways that devastated mainly low income neighborhoods and encouraged the automobile. And then you get into a situation now where driving through New York City at the wrong time is a nightmare. And the
Yeah.
same thing with, Crater Lake. I mean, it's not New York City, but it's the traffic is and the congestion
Well,
because of the
the
personal
road
automobile is
system
horrendous.
in most parks, the road system. Well, I should say like standalone parks. If you're inner city
Right.
parks and stuff like that, you're reliant upon the local, transportation grid, whatever that is. But when you're at Grand Canyon, Glacier, Crater Lake, Yellowstone, Yosemite, blah blah blah, all
Yellowstone,
these,
yeah.
you know, all those road systems were done typically somewhere between the 30s and the 40s, right?
Right.
And yes, they pushed for the car. Stephen Mather, one of the first director of the National Park Service, he specifically did that to try to get people to learn what the parks were and get people to visit the parks, to try to save them, and to try to actually build a park system. So what started out as something that was like a good thing, has warped over time into this. Now, you're right. The vehicles are the number one really impact to our national park system. How do you deal with parking? How do you deal with the cars coming in on these old roads that have not been redesigned in decades? Um, or even if they've been redesigned, the layout has not been redesigned, right? You, we have a standing policy where you don't build new roads, right, in the parks. Um, and if you do, you have to have a specific reason for it. You have to justify it, and a lot of people don't want to put their neck on the line to try to justify doing that. So they're like legitimate reasons why it is the way it is. But the problem is, if, if we keep encouraging the use of vehicles, because we can't build, we're going to have these impacts and these issues. But there are solutions that can be used from park to park, and I think one of the things that kind of drew me to my career path was how do we find these solutions, and what can we do? I think multimodal and public transit and these things are really easy ways of using the existing infrastructure and reducing the number of vehicles that come into a park and providing for a better visitor experience, right? And you can do it in a way that is, forgive the terminology, but equitable, accessible,
You're going to get it shut down
uh,
already.
right?
See, next thing you're going to be talking about, more DEI stuff and getting us all shut down. ICE agents going to be breaking down your door. You can't
Right,
touch on those topics unless you're really radical. But you're
right,
absolutely right. And I will say this: I appreciated the shuttle bus to the trailhead at Grand Canyon when I was there years ago. I thought it was great. Park over here and take the shuttle, and the shuttle comes on a regular basis, and it's convenient, it's clean, it's efficient. I didn't want to have to drive around and wait in traffic and fight for parking and all that other nonsense and worry about my vehicle. I'd rather park in one location and then get on a shuttle and not have to deal with uh, the issues of driving and the congestion and the emissions and the parking and there's a host of problems. And again, that's a whole nother episode. But why don't you tell people, you know, what your favorite job was and who your favorite supervisor was of all time?
oh, okay. So I did about a year stint with the BLM,
The
working
BLM.
for
There we
Kevin.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I actually did like that job. That was a fun job because it was, a fairly, it's not a super large budget, but it was about, $70 million or so. And that was fun. And you get to work with a bunch of professional people who are all in, land management and doing different things within that, different specialties, from NEPA and even like legal mitigation and, environmental compliance and GIS and all this stuff. But so you get to meet all these people that are doing these very, these specialty type things, and help them do their work. So I was a helper, right? My job wasn't to um, actually spend the money. My job was to help them spend money, but help them make good decisions and help you and your boss and your boss's boss, make the best decision on how that money gets allocated. And also to follow the rules because some of that money is allocated specifically by Congress. So you have to spend this X amount on these things like sagebrush at the or sage grouse. Um, is one of those instances that popped to mind. So it was a lot of fun because it's like a puzzle, and you're dealing with all these numbers and and all these different types of people, and that was a lot of fun. So I like the budget type work. Um, it is different than being in the field. So when I was at Grand Canyon, I really enjoyed that. Like planning was great because you got to see and do these kind of make sure all these projects and stuff kind of move along and we're planning correctly for them and we're not leaving things out. So one of the biggest my biggest pet peeves is when someone throws in a project and they're pushing it along and they're going all for it, but no one remembers why the project was put forward to begin with, and that issue is no longer there, and they're still pushing the project, and you just have you're like, hey, let's take a deep breath here. Why do you want to put a bus stop at this spot? The bus doesn't come down this road anymore, right? I mean, come on. So it's like it's part of that. Everybody talks about fraud, waste, and abuse, but one of my big things is like I love making things more efficient. I love making things less wasteful. If we can do it in a if we can get rid of the quote fraud, waste, and abuse, and most of it's not fraud, most of it maybe you can call it waste. I don't call it abuse either. It's more like someone didn't, for whatever reason, didn't think this project through. And to be fair, these projects are huge, right? Right now, there's a project going on at the Grand Canyon. It is, oh God, I think it's now up to $200 million for the water treatment, the water supply line. It's called the Trans Canyon Water Line. They grab water from our water source and they're pumping it up to the top of the South Rim. But along with that comes wastewater treatment facilities and water treatment facilities for supply side, and all these different things. Like I pushed. It's been several years ago now, but I was like, hey, we really need to hire someone who understands SCADA. So in SCADA is, I don't even remember what it stands for, but it's the electronic controls that run a water system. And you have like a SCADA engineer or a SCADA technician at almost every wastewater treatment plant in the country. That they run the systems, you know, that injects the chlorine and check, run, manage the sensors, So um, it can get really complicated. And we're in the middle of nowhere, right? And we have you know our wastewater treatment facility, I think it's like 40 years old at the Grand Canyon, and there was an even older one, um, that has fallen into a, not, I won't even call it disrepair, it's ruins. It looks like an old ruin. But I guess my point is, like, we don't have anybody that understands this because God knows I don't. I know you need to have a system, but this isn't like hooking up my iPhone or my Google Pixel to a dashboard and going, okay, yeah, we're good to go. Turn that thing on.
Yeah, you need
Um,
specialized expertise, and
Specialized expertise, and then
this
our
came
IT
up with the.
folks.
Yeah,
Yeah, our IT folks, they have already. Grand Canyon has an antiquated system because it's just the hand that they were dealt, and they haven't had the money to upgrade it. But they know particular things. They know, networking and cybersecurity and things like that, but not necessarily these standalone systems, right? Or how these standalone systems integrate into a larger a secure network, right? So there's like all these other questions having to go on. I was like, we really, so we ended up hiring somebody to come in. Um, Now he left in the DRP, so he's no longer there, but he was active with that project, helping them plan and helping the contractors plan what type of system to put in place. Without having that type of expertise on the ground, would the wastewater treatment guys even understand how to run the system once the system is built by the contractor, right? And so these are really complicated, you're talking, $200 million projects that should last 50 to 75 years. this isn't a simple, I'm building a park bench on the street, right? We can't get that done right. So, the guy's an idiot. No, these are very complicated projects from, when you talk to infrastructure. And I found it just fascinating to be able to be a part of that and help get these people together and be able to work through all that stuff. And people get so mad because they see their own area expertise. They're like, oh, I hear it from maintenance guys all the time. Why did they buy that particular, HVAC filter? Is really hard to remove. I would have just done this. So easy. These guys are stupid. Well, attached to that, $50 filter you're bitching about is a $20 million HVAC system that does, 8 buildings and takes care of blah blah blah. You know, hold your horses a little bit. Open your mind a little bit more. It's a little bit more complicated than what you're making it out to be. But I had to deal with that a lot though, because I worked directly for the superintendent. So when you had complaints, my desk is where all the complaints came, whether they're public, uh, citizens, visitors, um, contractors, concessionaires, and staff. Would come to me first, and so that
So
you
if
know
anybody doesn't like this podcast, go to Chris. You
that's
better talk to.
I'm the one with
I
the
don't
email.
like I don't like this podcast. Number one, it's boring. Number two, that guy Kevin, he swears too much, and he's always making jokes about stuff. He does not taking it seriously. I've worked for the National Park Service for 40 years, and I don't appreciate his attitude. Stuff like that. Go to Chris. Chris is he's the go-to complaint guy. But yeah, see, you're absolutely correct. Running these facilities, or it doesn't have to be National Park Service. It could obviously be a national forest. It could be BLM lands. It could be state, game lands, whatever. A lot of times, it's like running a municipality. You have
Oh yeah.
wastewater treatment. You have water supply issues. You have
Well, Grand
uh,
Canyon is bigger than the town where my farm was located,
there you
right?
go. Yeah.
That town was about 2,500 people, and Grand Canyon during the summer is 3,000 to 3,500 people. It is a
And
town,
the farm,
right?
everybody was using outhouses. They didn't have the
That's
high end
right.
filters, and yeah, they didn't have the professional wastewater treatment. Yeah, that's right. They were still using buckets.
Buckets and a water hose.
So that's yeah, you're absolutely correct. So these positions, and people don't typically understand, there's this whole entourage, this whole organization behind effectively managing the public lands. It goes way beyond, oh, and this is what drove me crazy. So what the administration was doing and is doing continuously now, the current administration, is they think that this overhead they can get rid of the overhead. They can get rid of the professionals like Chris. Oh, we don't need a guy at headquarters. We don't need a guy at headquarters coordinating GIS. We don't need somebody that's looking at economics. We don't need no. We need somebody that's cleaning the restrooms and collecting the fees. And these amateurs think that that's how you run an organization as complex as, again, just to use it as a national park. And you can't, that infrastructure, those professionals. And so when I worked with you, and you're much too humble because you were much more than a helper, knowing how the ins and outs of the budget process was critical to the success of the operation. So don't downplay your contribution. But working with those people that were at the peak of their skill sets, the top economist in the Bureau of Land Management, or the people that were running the mitigation program, offsets for carbon emissions and for wetlands. Those people really knew their stuff, and they were
Hmm.
a
Yeah,
pleasure to work with, and they were targeted. They were targeted by
they
the
were targeted.
by the administration because they're intelligent, they're highly professional, and they were getting their jobs done, but they may not have agreed with some of the poorly thought out, to be polite, initiatives that came out of the administration. And, that's a good part of the main reason why I'm not there is, you, you can't run these organizations like that. You can't treat your employees like that and expect you to have the kind of sustainable system. And I think you've communicated well that there is a lot involved in these things, and the work that you did, whether it was at Grand Canyon or at Golden Gate, was critical. Is there a lot of stupid stuff that gets done? Yeah, and we will have a lot of fun talking about the stupid
Oh
stuff that
yeah,
gets done.
I love
You
those
know,
stories. Those are some of
oh,
the,
these stories are the
because
best.
yeah, but not only are you highlighting something, but it's also learning, a learning
Right,
experience, right?
right,
Because I
exactly.
didn't meet one person that I worked with in any agency that even when they made a dumb mistake, didn't learn from it and weren't embarrassed by it, right? It wasn't that they were doing this maliciously. They weren't trying to screw something up, you know. But these are people with, I hate to say it, years and years of experience. I guess I don't hate to say it, but years and years of experience. Most of the time, they have degrees and a lot of times advanced degrees. They're smart people, but the things are just so complicated that mistakes are going to happen. And when they do miss it, they have this incredible guilt because every one of them is, and my wife pointed this out to me this morning because I made some comment, demeaning, myself or something. And she looked at me and was like, well, that's because you're mission driven and you believe in the mission, right? And you take it personally when things don't go according to that mission or whatever you're working with uh, doesn't help. That's the type of person you are. So I guess the biggest thing, from our conversation today, about introducing ourselves is I am very mission driven, and the mission of the National Park Service and the Department of Interior and these other organizations. At the end of the day, you can distill them down to like one major thing, and it's to, um, and I'll even go further than just protect the public lands, but it's to help and support the American people. At the end of the day, that's what I do, and that's what I want to do. And now that I'm not working for the U.S. government, I'm helping some nonprofits do that. I'm helping some people do that. I'm trying to help some staff deal with their place in all of this. But then this podcast is an extension of that. I'm hoping that this podcast will help enlighten other people so they can help support the American people as well in their own way, whether that's through public lands or, you know, just having an understanding of what happens in parks or, national recreation areas or, you know, um, national forest or whatever, right? I'm hoping that the things that we're doing here will help bolster that whole thing, which brings me to like the supposed theme. We played with themes for a couple weeks, and actually the theme I kind of stole, Kevin, was um, conservation is resistance, right? And that's from ex director of the Park Service, Jonathan Jarvis. Um, I think he's an incredible guy, but
Now he was
and
director of the National Park Service. Yeah,
yes, yes,
right.
and so he just released like a Substack thing on
So what was it?
conservation and
Conservation is
is
resistance.
resistance.
Resistance or resistance is conservation.
Yeah, so he said it's hope is not a strategy, conservation is an act of resistance. And so he's got a whole
Wow.
Substack article on this, and which I find just fascinating.
Oh,
Um,
you forward. Yeah, I did read that.
yeah, I
You've
think
done
I sent that
a
to you.
really good job. I mean, you really did a good summary here of what we're trying to achieve with the podcast. Although I should say, I'm only here not I'm not mission driven. I'm just here to have a good time and laugh. So that's my mission. I guess you could call that my mission. My mission is to enjoy myself and to laugh my ass off. And I do that quite frequently with Chris talking to him. So I always paraphrase the Borg, from Star Trek Next Generation, uh, paraphrase them. The Borg, notorious for saying resistance is futile, and I say resistance isn't futile; it's mandatory. That's
Hmm.
my
Yeah.
spin on the Borg. So yeah, that's a really good summary of what we're trying to achieve here. Very very articulately put, very noble. almost brought a tear to my eye. I could feel upwelling of patriotism coming up there, but I squashed it before it got out of control.
Well, it was
So,
funny. That was all off the hip, man. All off the hip.
well, that's
I
what
don't.
this podcast is supposed to be. I don't have any
Yeah.
notes. Look at my notes. My notes say, get online at 9 a.m. That's all it says. There's no notes. I have no idea
I
what I'm
love
going to
it.
say.
I love it. Well,
Yeah,
that was the
that's,
direction we got from our producer. Lisa was like, "You tell Kevin. You tell that big dub animal." I'm kidding. See that?
I've
You
never met
tell
her.
him.
Oh, I've
I
never met
know.
you either. I've only
Um,
known you, virtually. As
Virtually,
far as I'm
yeah.
concerned, you could
Um,
actually be AI generated. I have no proof that you're not. So,
Max
whatever.
Headroom.
But
Yeah.
yeah, Max, nobody's going to know that reference. You just dated
Yeah.
yourself. You just alienated like a big component of our audience. So next episode, you'll have to put
Well,
a
I thought
Max
my
Headroom
hat and my
reference.
plaid shirt would do that already. Um,
Yeah, well, that's like a quintessential ex federal land manager outfit.
right, right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, but she did say, like, don't take notes. You guys already have what you need in your head. You guys just need to talk. And she's listened to us talk. What now, for 3 years, 2 years,
Yeah.
3 years, and
I didn't know she was eavesdropping. I didn't know that.
oh yeah, she's sneaky. Um, and we first started talking about doing a podcast or something. She was like, "You need to do this because the two of you talking together is friggin' hilarious." And so I hope it's
You make
fun.
me
I
laugh.
hope people I hope people like it.
I can't
Um,
wait to talk about some of these fucked up projects that people do, because I got a whole host of stupid shit that went on. Like,
right?
who the hell decided to do this? Listen to this story.
Yeah. So I think uh, we're getting ready to sign off. So hang in there just another few minutes, folks. Our first episode, I wanted to have it a little bit more structured, but we blew that out of the water, and that's fine. I think we're going to call that. This will be the first episode, and then we'll try to be a little bit more structured on the second one. But I do think it was really important for us to be able to talk about the stuff that's important to us, and who we are. Like I don't really need your resume as much as knowing what is important to you and where you're coming from. And so I think we got that, and that'll come across. You
I
know,
was just on in a meeting with the board of directors. I'm on a couple of nonprofits on the board of directors, right? And they had this exercise where people um, tell us the first time you flew on an airplane. That false sense of familiarity that you're supposed to build in corporate meetings and shit. And not to slam the executive, not it wasn't the executive director, it was the chair of the board of
chair of the
directors.
board.
It's a good guy, he's a good guy and everything. But I've been through those scripted exercises before, and I made fun of it, when my turn came, as I'm apt to do, and said,
Oh, you're
I
a
hate ride.
dick.
Yeah, I know I am. I hate riding on planes. Why didn't you ask something interesting, like the first time you rode a horse or something like that, right? And then he took it seriously, and he says, "Well, it's so that we can, find out more about each other and understand more about each other." I mean, my response to that was, um, "It's not going to work to your advantage to know more about me, and it's definitely not going to enhance my standing
So
in the organization. So the less people know about me, the better off they are and I am. That's been my motto. So I was advised in multiple renditions of my career multiple iterations of my career, when I took a new job, somebody that knows me really well said, look, you have two rules. Don't change anything and keep your damn mouth shut. So the first thing I'm going to do is go on a podcast.
all right,
Guaranteed to
so
get me
keep
in
your damn mouth
trouble.
shut, and I think
Yeah,
we'll
it's
call it a
guaranteed to
day
get us in
right
trouble.
there.
I don't care now. My First Amendment rights are fully reinstated. I'm going to exercise them, and I'm going to call bullshit when I see it. Whether it has to do with the administration, yes, I may end up at Gitmo or El Salvador or somewhere like that. And I've been to El Salvador. I don't want to go back. Um, you know, these kind of things that are undoubtedly going to eventually occur. So, in the meantime, while this podcast is still legal and we're still up and running, um, we'll say what we want. And we'll
All right.
hopefully entertain people and keep them informed. Let them know some of the behind the scenes stuff and some of the stories and some of the interviews I'm really excited about. Some of these cool folks that we can get on here to talk about their experiences and their thoughts, and hopefully make it pertinent, relevant, and ridiculous.
And ridiculous. That sounds good. That's our show for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Chris Burnett, joined as always by my good friend Kevin Heatley, a refugee from New Jersey, the landfill of opportunity. And to you, our listeners, thank you for sharing part of your day with us. We couldn't do it without you. You can find our merchandise, podcast notes, and other fun stuff at www.elburno.com. Elburno is proudly owned and operated by current and former National Park Service Rangers, and every purchase helps support Rangers and their families. A special thanks to our whole team, especially our production crew. This episode, like all the others, was brought to life by our executive producer and all-around wizard, Elise Burnett. We definitely couldn't do this without her. You can also find more about our work and bios at www.elburno.com. Before we close, just a quick reminder, nothing in this podcast should be taken as legal advice. If you need legal guidance, please consult an attorney licensed in your jurisdiction. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. It helps more people find the show and join the conversation. This podcast, along with all related merchandise, is a production of El Burno Studios, a division of El Burno Productions, Ltd.